What's up? Welcome in. Hoge and Jahns with you without Adam Jahns today. And we have a very special co-host. He's been on the show before, but co-hosting for the first time, jumping in for Adam Jahns today, Courtney Cronin from ESPN. What's up, Courtney?
Not much. How are you doing? Enjoying the
I'm
off
good.
season?
I mean, it never really feels like an off season, as you know very well too. I do have to say though, you are doing a terrible job already of filling in for Jahns because you showed up on time.
Oh, I was a couple minutes late. I got on at like 9:01, and I usually what was the Bill Parcells thing? If you're 5 minutes early, you're late. That's typically how I try to abide by things. But I'll do better next time. I'll come in at 9:10.
Yeah, that's more like the Jahns has his own time zone, and there's like Central Standard Time, and then there's Central Jahns time, and it's 10 minutes after the regular time that the rest of us are on. So, but anyway, thanks for jumping on today. So, Courtney, we get a little news to talk about this morning. The Bears, I guess they're getting they're trying to get extensions done while the rest of the sports world's watching other things. I think they got the Kyler Gordon one done during the Masters on Sunday, and then everybody's watching the Bulls playing game last night, including Caleb Williams, who's sitting there in the front row. And then we find out that TJ Edwards gets his extension as well. What was your initial reaction to TJ Edwards getting locked up? He seemed like he was next in line.
Yeah, and I mean, he was going into the final year of his contract anyways. For Ryan Poles to get two of these done the week ahead of the draft, it's earlier than he's typically doled out contract extensions as a GM. One to the first player that he drafted, who is his biggest draft success story to date. So that one made sense. And then to another player who very clearly, if it's another defensive player, this has the Dennis Allen sign off. So I think that speaks volumes to how TJ Edwards is viewed by this defensive staff without ever actually getting into, they're on the field now, but they're doing like running and sprints and, off, like this is the phase one of the off season. So there's no football happening, but clearly, the career season that he had last year, the 284 tackles over the first two seasons he was in Chicago, the leadership element, he was a captain, he checked every box, I assume, for this defensive staff to say, yeah, we can envision building around this guy. Is he Demario Davis? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, his numbers were comparable to Demario when he was with Dennis Allen in New Orleans last year specifically. I don't know if it's a direct comp, but it would be somebody like that's it. That was a cornerstone piece in that defense in New Orleans. So that, of course, is the first name you think of when you think of, hey, Bears are extending a linebacker. What's Dennis Allen? How does he deploy his linebackers? What's the use? How does he envision him long-term for the plans for this defense? And TJ Edwards on a very reasonable 2-year, $20 million deal fits right in. So I'm not surprised at all, given the, where he's at right now and going into the final year of his contract. And you kind of wonder, all right, is there anybody else that's next? Obviously, Tremaine Edmonds signed a 4-year deal. TJ signed a 3-year deal when they both came in like the same day of free agency in 2023. So he's got a ways to go. There's nobody else that really like jumps off the page though, outside of the guys that just got here, the trade guys. So Jonah Jackson and of course Joe Thuney going into the final year of his deal. Those are the ones that are next. And you would imagine like up until training camp, like Ryan Poles typically does these in July, like he did with Cole Kmet, like he did with DJ Moore. So there's still time. It's just interesting that they're going defense first and handling those contracts versus the offensive linemen that they just brought in who have, some work to be done with their deals.
Well, I could also see with the Joe Thuney situation, the draft potentially having some type of impact on that, and who they end up with, where they end up with. If it's a guy like Will Campbell who they just really, really like, but maybe aren't totally sure will stick at left tackle. So you get these guys in the building a little bit over the summer and sort of see it all play out. I don't know that you need to be in a huge rush to get Joe Thuney done. On the other hand, I could also see it get the way they're pumping these things out. I could also see it getting done pretty fast. But when it comes to TJ Edwards, I'll be honest, I expected this to be a little bit higher. As soon as the Kyler Gordon deal got done on Sunday, I started poking around a little bit and be like, hey, texting some people, what do you expect? Where does TJ Edwards, sort of line up? And I was expecting more like 12 million APY. So for 2 years, in 20, also a 3-year deal. So it's a 2-year deal and it's 20 million. So it's 10 million on the 2 extended years. I thought it'd be a little bit higher, so I think it's a good deal for the Bears.
Yeah, it feels like it's the hometown discount, right? Like the guy. I think part of it is that TJ probably doesn't want to go anywhere else. I mean, he's a from like the area, so I think I think that definitely factors into this is where I want to be. Can I get the security for another 2 years on top of the final year I've got in my deal right now? And he's played good football. His numbers, the tackle numbers and where he's been, career high in sacks last year, the quarterback hits, the TFLs, like he's ascending still, but I don't know how much more, like, I think has he played his best football? I think he's at a sustainable level to where the Bears think we don't need to overpay for an off-ball linebacker necessarily, someone who's not consistently rushing the passer, but when he does, like, can be a vital part of, any sort of sub package that you throw in there. And, for Dennis Allen, what has he talked about? I mean, we'll hear from him, later at Hallis Hall. Like, he wants an attacking defense. The players that we've talked to have all mentioned that. And that's a defense that's going to be more aggressive in getting after the quarterback. So I think that will rely more on a linebacker to do that. Like, for TJ, should he have waited? Should he have, gotten those numbers up a little bit? Maybe the sack numbers. I don't know if it would have changed much, but I think it's a friendly deal for the team. And, for his side to come and approach them and say, like, with the number that they were looking for, the number the Bears were looking for, and then to come, $10 million a year after he signed a deal that was 3 years, 19 and a half. It's an upgrade. It's an upgrade for him. It's a pay increase for him, but really it's not outrageous by any stretch. Like, this is a deal that I think they're probably feeling pretty good about, that they got a good, solid player under contract for 2 more years beyond this year, and they didn't have to overpay.
So that brings me to something I wanted to bring up, because I learned something last night on, the amazing Twitter website that exists. I didn't know there was an anti-TJ Edwards subset of Bears fans. Like, there were people like within the Bears Twitter community that were like upset about the extension and were like, I disagree with this. And I was like shocked by it. I was like, what's wrong with TJ Edwards? He had a contract that he was clearly outplaying, and it's not like, so he was making a little bit over $6 million a year, which was tremendous value for the Bears. He still got 1 year left on that one. So they give him a raise to $10 million, which he's clearly earned. It's not like this guy is going to be on some massive contract that's like breaking you for the future, and it's only a 2-year extension. I was just like, I didn't even know that there was a world in which anybody was going to be like, oh, this is a terrible deal, but apparently that exists.
Are these the same people who are still upset about them trading Roquan Smith?
They might be. It might be. I don't know. I don't keep track of everybody's opinions. There's a lot to keep track of here, but you might be onto something there.
Those are the people who, their school of thought is you traded away an all-pro linebacker and paid 2 for the price of 1, and 1 who has had an incredible 2 years with 2.5 years with the Baltimore Ravens. And Tremaine Edmonds, I think, has underachieved since he's been here. He certainly took a step back last year. TJ Edwards has been fine. I don't know if people just group them in together because it's 2 versus the price, sort of around the price that you would have paid 1 when those free agent deals came in 2023. But if there's anybody you'd be upset with, it would be like, if you're like zeroing in on those 2 linebackers, it would have to be Tremaine Edmonds, just based on he really took a step back last year. That's not what you paid for when you gave him the 4-year deal in 2023. But TJ Edwards has been fine. Like, he's been a good, solid player who can, be one of the pieces. Like, they're getting older and they're going to get more expensive. Like, when you build a team where you're not constantly having a revolving door of players coming in and out, and you start retaining players, like they got to a point where they started to retain. And that means the roster is going to get more expensive, and you're going to have to make decisions on who you want to keep, who you want to go after and like let go in free agency to go after somebody else, and then who you're going to be trying to bring in as the next players that you're going to want to keep via the draft if those picks work out. And I don't know, TJ Edwards just seems to check the boxes that everything they talk about, the culture element, the fit within Dennis Allen's scheme, everything he's done off the field, on the field. Like, is he going to blow you away with like his on-field ability? No, but he's a good, solid linebacker who can play the weak side position and I don't know what more you can ask for from that.
Right. And I think a lot of times this time of year, the teams tell us what they think by what they do with their actions. So what we've learned here, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, just based on how they handled the linebacker situation, they clearly did not think Jack Sanborn was a fit in this defense. Otherwise, they would have been a no-brainer to bring him back. It would not have been expensive. They easily could have done it. Instead, they let him go to Dallas, where he's going to keep playing in the same scheme under Matt Eberflus. Now they extend TJ Edwards. So it's saying the opposite. We think this guy is a fit for this defense, and they're giving him a raise, which tells you they probably think he's going to be even better or should be. Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the results you get, but
he's hit a baseline that they're comfortable with. Like, if you can just play your baseline for the next 3 years, including this season, then they will have gotten a return on their investment. That's how they view it.
Right. Like, if they had given him a Zach Bond contract, which I think is up towards $17 million per year, then that would have been like, oh, we're actually projecting him to be way, way, way better. But that was he was an all-pro last year. So, and that's not probably a fair standard to hold TJ Edwards to. This is, to me, just seems more like you've outperformed your contract. We're going to pay you what you've been playing at. And it seems like a good deal for both sides.
Yeah, I don't see where the complaint would be. And, again, they're at a point now where they want to retain players, where they're not. First 2 years, they were letting guys walk through the door because they were just trying to field a team. Now they're trying to field a very competitive team. And, even hearing from Kyler Gordon on Monday, hearing from the players last week, they all think this is going to be a competitive team. So you can't just, I think it'd be weird to let him play out this deal and then decide later on, where you can get him now for a very reasonable price. And they did. Like, this to me is a simple business thing that they did. And they've got to feel good that they didn't have to overpay when there might be guys in the future that they have to overpay for. Who knows how well Darnell Wright plays this year? I mean, he's going to be next in line for an extension for the rookies. Guys still out on the rookie deals next year. There could even still be guys in that first draft class. Let's see what happens with Jaquan Brisker in the future. They've been strategic in knocking off the ones that they felt that they needed to, the ones that are the top priority right now. That's why, you bring up a good point about Tooney. Maybe they find, the next in line, somebody who might actually be better at left guard. I know the arm length thing is a thing. Maybe they draft him to play left tackle. Maybe they decide that, he's better at left guard. And then maybe you don't need to keep Joe Tooney. I still would extend him. He's 32 years old. He's the best guard in football. I think that one would be next. But again, you're right. We'll see what their actions tell us how they feel about this roster. And next week, 1 week from right now, we'll find out if they have the left tackle of the future who might be a left guard of the future on the roster, then maybe that extension gets pushed out even further. And maybe it doesn't happen. Who knows?
Well, before we get to some of the draft talk for next week, let's talk about the guy they drafted first overall last year, and that's Caleb Williams, who was on the cover of Esquire, and a big piece that I thought was super interesting. I think, a lot of it we kind of already knew about him, but still certain parts were a little bit revealing. The fact that he was in Denmark with his girlfriend for a big part of the offseason. Did you have any major takeaways from this Esquire piece?
Well, I was expecting big things out of this. This is the magazine where they sent Gay Talese to follow Frank Sinatra around for an extended period of time for one of the greatest profiles ever written, and Frank Sinatra has a cold. So Caleb's done GQ. He's done Esquire. Is he going to do Rolling Stone next? Wall Street Journal? He aims very high with the profiles that are written about him in the types of publications that they come in. These are not just run of the mill. These are magazines that have a lot of prestige and a lot of historical relevance. So I was expecting big things. And I think I kind of align with you that I didn't learn anything new particularly, but you saw a version of himself in this magazine, or the way that he came across, that shows you the celebrity quarterback of 2025. Somebody who thought it was kind of fitting that he was at a cafe in Copenhagen called Side Hustle Cafe. And he's doing this interview talking about his VC firm that he founded about a year ago, the 888 Midas. He's talking about fashion. He's talking about, being at, I think it was Paris Fashion Week with his girlfriend, like all of these things that have nothing to do with football, using football as the backdrop. So I thought it fit because this is a quarterback who says he wants to use like his creative mind to do big things. And that's more than just football. And, we're at a place in time where you can break the mold of just being the robotic quarterback and have other interests. Now, you're going to get flamed for those other interests if you don't win on the field. And I think he knows that. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, to go and do an article, allow somebody to write an article, a profile about you to this extent that shows your fashion sense. I mean, there's a whole photo shoot in there and like wearing avant-garde things. It's similar to what he did in the GQ article when he was still in college. He lets his walls down to show you he's not just a football player, but that will not be okay with fans if it's another 5-12 season, if it's another season where these players who have been talking pretty loudly in the offseason that they expect to win. And even Caleb in this story said that year one was about proving that I can play at this level. Year two is about now being competitive and winning big. Those are his words. So if you don't, then people can, what's going to happen. People are going to point back to this article and be like, oh, he cried after games. Like that's a reason that he wasn't ready for this moment. Oh, he, so focused on other stuff outside of football, the fashion, the, making money elsewhere, that he's not focused on, winning at the highest level. You open yourself up to that criticism. But I was impressed by the level of depth that came from this, even though it was a lot that we already knew, but just portraying it through a different lens from somebody who doesn't cover sports. I think that's cool when you get a profile written about, like a lot of these. I think there was one done on Joe Burrow a couple of years ago. It's neat to see how non-sports reporters cover some of the biggest athletes in sports and how they write about them and how they present them to an audience that probably doesn't care much about sports.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Joe Burrow because I've even going back to last year when there were some of these conversations, even before the draft, about Caleb's got all these interests and all these things, and is that going to be a problem for the Bears or not? And obviously, it turned out to not be an issue. But I remember coming back to Joe Burrow a lot and being like, dude, Joe was the same way. Like he was Joe Cool. He had all these. It's not, I don't know enough about like his business ventures or anything like that, like how far he's leaned into that, but just in terms of the persona, but he backed it up on the field very, very quickly. And it's like, now he almost just like forget that was ever a thing or an issue at all. And the same thing applies here with Caleb. To me, what I find interesting about is the timing, because, and I don't have a problem with it either way. I just think that there were kind of two different paths that Caleb and his team could have gone this year. And one of those paths that would have been totally understandable was like, yeah, you can still be doing all these things, but maybe let's not like blow them up and do a huge feature on them until, we get back to work and the football stuff starts coming around. That could have been a route they took. Instead, he's leaning into it. I mean, he's saying in this Esquire piece, like, I don't care what anyone thinks, like other than my teammates. But by the way, that's also an important part of this too, because with the way last season went, it wouldn't surprise me if there are people in the locker room that are like, can we just concentrate on football and get this thing on the right track before we, dive into all these other things. But again, I don't have an issue with it, but I think what you're saying out loud is sort of the elephant in the room in this whole thing. Is like, you got to win football games.
Yeah, you can do these things. You can. Like, I think he kind of breaks the mold, because typically when somebody has that many struggles on the field, there's none of this. There's no access, right. There's no vulnerability. There's no spotlight on an Esquire piece. I'm sure that like the detractors would be like, why is Esquire writing a gigantic they're giving him the cover of this magazine and it's a multi-page spread on a quarterback of a team that 5-12 last year fired its offensive coordinator and fired its head coach. But that's what makes it interesting, because we typically don't see this. Usually guys who struggle go into their shell and they're not vulnerable and they turn into robots and they turn inward and we don't know anything about them. I appreciate that Caleb was willing to let let his guard down to a degree. I think some of the, like, I can hear a lot of the quotes that, like, a lot of the things he was quoted as saying, I can hear him saying, because we've heard that. I'm going to work my tail off. I'm going to, when he's talking about like how many losses have I had, when he's like counting them in his head, he did that with us. Like that's all who Caleb is. But like, I appreciate the fact that he wasn't willing to sugarcoat everything, like admitting the thing about Matt Eberflus, how, and it's not groundbreaking, but how it was perceived in the locker room. And then afterwards, the fallout from the Hail Mary game, Caleb's never said that exactly. So I think you need something like this, all those months removed from, his former head coach, to be willing to be honest, for lack of a better term, like, cause that's what you got out of that. But I know there's a lot of people, it's funny how the social media world works and the aggregator accounts, like Caleb Williams cries in all giant caps. I think it was from like ML Football the other day.
Ugh.
Like, here's my issue with people who are like just so irritated. There are a lot of people like from coming out of the woodworks, kind of, maybe it's the same people who are like upset about TJ Edwards' contract. Like the people that you're like, where did you come from? Who are all upset about the fact that he said he shed a few tears amid all of these losses. It may not have been published at other points in time throughout sports, but I guarantee he's not the first quarterback who has gone home and cried tears of frustration over it not going right. And if you're upset about that, take a real hard look at who you are and like how you handle stress and how you handle tense moments. This kid came in with the weight of a franchise. No other. Jane Daniels didn't come into Washington like, oh my God, I've got to take this horrible franchise who had horrible ownership for all these years and all these expectations, and I've got to go to the NFC Championship game. They were 4-13 the year before he got there. There were no expectations. Caleb came into a team that has not had a franchise quarterback literally ever since anybody listening to Hoge and Jahns right now. Come on, like, check yourself. None of you were alive the last time this team had a drafted and developed franchise quarterback. Imagine what he had to go through to compartmentalize all of that while still, he has all these other interests. Like, I don't think it's fair to say, hey, Caleb, like, only focus on football now. Like, we know that you like all these other things. Put them aside so you can just be a robot. That's not who he is. He's never once acted like that. So why would you all of a sudden expect him to like change his stripes now? Like, that's weird to me when people are like, no, he has to only focus on football. He can't be vulnerable anymore. No more painting your nails, no more crying, no more anything else. Like, this is who he is. Now, if they lose, and if he's the reason that they're losing games, he's going to get flamed. And that's what happens when you are a public figure and you put yourself out there and you say, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care about your opinion of me. It's only my teammates who matter. Like, when things go poorly, people are going to point back to the easiest low-hanging fruit to say, well, that's the reason that you're not good. So he's got to understand that. But I have no issue with him admitting that he really struggled last year mentally. Like, I think there'd be something wrong with you if you didn't. Like, and the fact that he can admit that, I think, is a different, like, to publicly admit that is different than other quarterbacks that we've seen, others top tier athletes. But I promise you, he's not the only one who's doing it. He's just the only one who might be speaking about it in the manner in which he did.
Well, and what's super interesting about what you're talking about is like if you're both mad that he has all these other interests and you're also mad that he's upset after losing, then you're just not giving him a chance, because the reality is, if you're mad that he's got all these other interests, you're saying, I want him to care more about football. But he's also telling you, I do care this much about football that I'm going home and crying after losing. And by the way, all that stuff we already knew, but the stuff about him, deciding at the age of 10, I want to be quarterback so I can have more control over the game, getting up with his dad at 5 a.m., going through all these workouts, doing workouts then after school, and like, to the point that he basically hated it, but grinded his way through it. That's a guy who cares about football. So, the hope is that it's both, that it all works out, but don't be mad at the guy at the same time for being upset about losing when you're also mad about him having all these other interests. You're just looking for reasons to be mad.
I think there are a lot of people who are in that camp for whatever reason, but like, let's not forget, remember the Utah game where he went in the stands, found his mom, this is who he is, guys. Like, and if you're not okay with that, I think it speaks to something about like how we view masculinity in sports and how we view what toughness is. Like, this to me is on a smaller scale, a look into what that looks like big picture wise, and how some people are just not okay with that, where you need the Herculean heroic archetype to be the person who leads your team and not the vulnerable person who has other interests outside of sports. It wasn't like he was there only focused on, his girlfriend's over in Copenhagen, like he's doing all this other stuff. He had his iPad with him. Like, that was one thing that the writer was talking about, where he's looking at football plays on his iPad. Like, this is his off season. A lot of guys go to Cabo and they don't do anything. And like, they're obviously people are training. He's back. He's been with the team. Like, I'm sure at some point he was doing workouts, but he's still focused on football. It just because it looks different doesn't mean that it's wrong or the wrong way of doing it.
And by the way, I think it's super cool that Caleb, he was at the Fire game on Sunday, and he's in the stands last night at the Bulls game. He's out and about town. The videos of him taking that football last night and signing it and then launching it in the stands, like, that's all good. Like, I remember when Mitch Trubisky got booed at the Bulls game right after getting drafted. So just think about that contrast.
Like, two things about that, because Peggy Kaczynski and I have had this conversation before, because obviously she covered the Bears for a very long time. And the 85 Bears, that group was so visible in the public. And there have been teams since then, obviously teams who haven't won Super Bowls, but even the team that did go to the Super Bowl, like, no one has been more visible than that team out in the community. It feels like a concerted effort, whoever's behind the scenes orchestrating it, where you've got Bears players like who are hanging out outside of like just being together during the season, but in the off season, going to events where they're seen. And they're also seen together, like all of the offensive linemen that were there, at the Fire game the other day, plus Caleb and John Jackson sitting courtside at the Bulls game last night. And like, when he turns around after he signs the football, like, listen to that crowd. Like, those are people who are excited about the prospect of what he's going to become this year. And I think that that's, the Bears, whoever it is that's like orchestrating like the vibes of selling hope in the offseason by having these guys present and at things. Like, it even goes back to last year when they were like first drafted, when it was like Keenan and Rome and Caleb all going to the Sky game. They're visible, and they're visible in the community. And that's, I think, what you want for a team that's trying to show, get behind us. We believe that there are big things about to happen. Like, I think they're like, from a marketing standpoint of marketing your players and your stars, that's probably the best way to handle it.
Also, that was the best moment of the Bulls game last night.
Yeah, it was.
And I'm absolute clunker.
Yeah, as a Bulls fan, I blame other Bulls fans for buying into, like, did you really sell them? Like, did they really sell you on some dream? They've been in the play-in. Like, just because you're in the play-in does not mean you're a good team. It's the reason it's called the play-in, not the playoffs. They've done this multiple times. They're not a good team. Did they go on a stretch run after trading Zach LaVine and Josh Giddey has a good second half of the season after the All-Star break? Yeah, but like, there was never any expectation they were going to do anything. Like, I have an issue with people who bought into false hope, because I think you played yourself, because they've told you through their actions. Like, we're talking about the Bears telling us through their actions. The Bulls have told you through their actions and inactions, they're a team that's never going to like fully commit to a rebuild the way you need to. Kind of like the Kings, another team that got bounced last night as a 9 seed. It's frustrating. So, I mean, it would be nice, I think, for Bears fans, for any fan in the city, to have a winning team that's not the Cubs to be a fan of right now. And to me, the cheers from those fans in attendance last night were like, those are fans who are starved for something right now. So Caleb throwing the ball all the way up to the 300 level or wherever the heck that thing went. They're ready for something to actually get behind.
By the way, I think that ball only landed like in the front row of the 200 level. Like, if you really watch where it
tweets like that, like is where he's sitting was right in front of press row. That's on the baseline. Yeah. I think Casey Johnson had a picture like with Caleb, like right in front of him. It did go far. I mean, the velocity of it was one thing, but I don't know if it like really hit. If people are acting like it hit the roof, it did not.
Yeah, I know. It was super cool. The Bulls tweeted out like, Caleb launched this thing. I'm like, That was cool. It was awesome. He's an NFL quarterback. I would expect the ball to go that far. But yeah, no, it was still a cool moment. I will admit, like, I got caught in the middle with the Bulls. I wasn't buying in any real hope. If any hope I had was that they get swept by the Cavs. Like, win a playing game.
That's what's going to happen for Miami. So
right, but I was enjoying the ride, like enjoying, like, hey, here's a younger team that's playing better. They're fun to watch, which I never thought they really were earlier in the season. I did take my son to a game a few weeks ago, so I was trying to enjoy it. But boy, that was a real kick in the face of reality last night when you're like, all of a sudden these guys have been playing so well, like Josh Giddey. Oh, all of a sudden he can't really do anything. And Kobe White's like, oh, they can just take the ball away from me. That hasn't been happening for the last couple of months. Like, it was kind of stunning, actually, like how different it actually was when a team was like, no, we're not going to let you just run the court on us for the whole game.
And I think it's like almost poetic the way that they fell apart, like just to show you this was all a facade. And until there's a true commitment from ownership to make things different, it won't look any different. Like that's the thing that's sad that Bulls fans have to, deal with. Like they've told you that it's like the ceiling, because the bar is on the floor, but like the ceiling of this team right now is play-in tournament and maybe get into the first round. And then what, they lose in 5 a couple years ago to Milwaukee.
Yeah, they won 1 game.
They're not a good team. They care more about the play-in tournament home game gate than they do about fielding a winning product. And that's what happens. That is what happens when you have bad ownership, and ownership that frankly just does not care about like winning and sustained winning.
Yeah. Fortunately, I think we're used to that in this city. Because it applies to their baseball team they own too.
Sure.
All right, let's shift to the draft. We are a week away from when we're recording this. It is Thursday morning. A week from now, the draft will be getting underway in Green Bay, where the weather will be whatever it is. I like how the NFL is now like, no, we were hoping for crappy weather because it's Green Bay.
Nobody wants, like, here's the thing, like, we want snow and the cold and the mystique of Lambeau when there's a game being played there in December, January. No one wants that in April. Like, Wisconsin, like, it might feel spring elsewhere. I think we're getting a 65-degree day here. It's 20 degrees colder up there, and it will always be that way. Like, the best you can hope for is that instead of snow, it's like rain, and it might be sleet. Like, I don't like when the draft is in places that, like, even last year in Detroit, it was not warm by any stretch. And it's cool that they move it around and it's got the outdoor element to it where the fans can all congregate. Like, I like that they've moved it away from Radio City and have done that now for the better part of the last like 15 years. But I just think that Green Bay is probably not the best destination to have it, especially when it is a core event.
I just laugh at the whole thing because, first of all, I'm not going to throw any shade at the NFL. It's miraculous what they've turned this event into.
Sure.
The draft doesn't even take place where they hold the draft. If you really think about it, the teams are picking these guys elsewhere. They're not there. The draft is actually remote. They're just putting a stage up somewhere and they're inviting 15 or so of the prospects to show up there and a bunch of fans, and the commissioner shows up. And that's it. And the reason we know this is because they literally held one of the best drafts remotely during COVID. It was so entertaining. So the fact that they pull this off every year and it's this huge thing is great. But like, people are always, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, you going to the draft? No, I'm not going to the draft because the draft is not actually there. The draft for the Bears is in Chicago. So
I get that question all the time, and I point to 2023. So like the draft is a TV event. So any of the local TV reporters like who cover the Bears, it does to a degree make sense to go. Last year, of course, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, I get it. In 2023, Darnell Wright wasn't there. Bears picked the player, wasn't there. So you're there for the first round. Like, what do I do? He's not there. Go home. But no, I mean, I've never actually been to the draft it's never been in a city that I've been covering a team. I've always covered it at whichever team I'm covering at the time, their facility. And it's much more fruitful to be there to actually hear from the GM, hear from the head coach, hear from the scouts, and then, talk to the prospect over Zoom than it is to be, in Green Bay, Detroit, Kansas City, wherever it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, the 2 years it was in Chicago, which you weren't back here in Chicago at that time. But they drafted Kevin White the first year. He was there. So that was like, oh, okay. So we had interviews with them and a press conference. The following year, they drafted Leonard Floyd, who was not there. And so it was like, okay, I guess I'll just sit here on press row and write a story about the pick, but he's not actually here. So it would have been better to be at Hal. So it is funny how that works. But where's your head at here for pick number 10? Do you have any, I don't know what the right word is, like favorites or guys that you just feel like are, man, if this person's here, I don't see how the Bears could pass on them?
Sure. I think at this point, I have a really hard time believing Ashton Genty is going to be there. I know that a lot of Bears fans hope that they take a running back at some point in this draft, but I think you go back to what Ben Johnson told us in Palm Beach. There's different flavors of running back. Like, you're going to walk away with one on day 2 if you don't get one day 1. So I think that's fine. I really do think they will take one in the second round. That's probably where, wherever Omari and Hampton goes, and maybe the Bears trade back into the first round. Maybe it's a late first round pick somewhere like 22 and beyond after, Denver's probably his floor. So 20, whatever it is, maybe it's him, maybe it's Quinshon Judkins, maybe it's somebody else. I think that that's a position that gets handled on day 2. I do not think it'll get handled day 1 because there's not a single mock from anybody reputable who has Genty falling to the Bears. So I think with 10, like Will Campbell probably gone by 7 to the Jets. Mel has, in back-to-back mock drafts, he has Tyler Warren from Penn State going to the Bears. I could absolutely see that. This offense is built on 12 personnel. He's a chess piece that you can use a lot of different ways. He's very versatile. He also knows the importance of blocking because Penn State had 2,000-yard running backs last year. So I think Bears fans would feel good if that happened. That's the only skill player, though, that I see going to the Bears. I think it's offensive line. And in Mel Kiper's latest mock, he had Calvin Banks going 1 after the Bears to the San Francisco 49ers. I could see Chicago, if Warren's not there, if Genty's not there, going, like, I don't think it would be an overdraft to take him by any stretch, like a pick or 2 higher than where he might go. Maybe he goes to Miami at 13 and some of these other mocks. I think that's a safe bet. And it makes sense considering what the investment has been this offseason for them to continue to invest in a position that has like some significant uncertainty. We don't know when Braxton Jones is going to be back. It doesn't sound from Ben Johnson's perspective like he's going to be a full go participant in training camp, which of course you understand he fractured his ankle. And who knows about Karan Amagaji? It seems like they think he has a high potential, but he hasn't done anything yet. So why would you let somebody like that go into training camp uncontested for a position that's of major need? So I just feel like all of those things factor into them going left tackle at 10. And if not left tackle, if not Tyler Warren, can you get another pass rusher there? Sure. We know how Ryan Poles feels about that.
You can, but the pass rushers are just sort of like, I don't know, mix them up.
You're drafting on projection. If it's Shamar Stewart, what did he have? 3.5 sacks.
He's never had a season with more than 1.5.
1.5.
That's crazy.
Mason Graham had 3.5. That's where my brain was. I not comparing, but Danielle Hunter didn't have a lot of production when he was at LSU and he was a rotational player. And he was the fastest to 50 sacks when I covered him in Minnesota. Not saying that's going to be Shamar Stewart, but like, you are drafting for any of these other guys, you are drafting on projection.
Yeah, I'm with you on the left tackle thing. And I think that the fact, like where they're picking, who's available, and what we saw them do with Darnell Wright a couple of years ago, because remember, they had the 9th pick, they traded back to 10, and that's where they took him. Just think about how that draft played out sort of leading up to it. Darnell Wright was, I remember Senior Bowl, early second round guy. That's where he was projected. Then kind of got close to the draft. Like, oh, he can maybe be in the 20s. And then all of a sudden, like the smoke started to build, and by draft day, that was my pick. That's why I'm like, I think the Bears are going to take Darnell Wright here. And so think about that in the sense of Ryan Poles doesn't care about other people's projections. If they target and they've done their homework, and remember, they went out and worked out Darnell Wright. They had this great workout at Tennessee with them, and that's sort of when they decided that he was their guy. I don't know who that guy is, but there might be that guy. And I think it's important to keep names like Calvin Banks Jr. Yeah. Like, I like him. A lot of people seem to not think he's going to be a tackle. I look at him, and I've watched a lot of Texas football last few years, and been like, I don't know, man. I see an NFL left tackle there. If they feel the same way, they're not going to care that he's being projected in the 20s. Or how about Josh Connerly from Oregon, who some might think is a second-round pick right now? Well, if he's their guy, the same thing kind of happened with Kyle Long back in the day. Kyle Long was considered a reach in the moment. Now, he didn't end up playing tackle, but that pick was also a little bit later in the teens. Mm-hmm. And he ended up being a really good player for the Bears for a long time.
Yeah, I think, and I'm just scrolling through this right now because Mel just put out a 3-round mock draft. Like, some of the names that have slipped, obviously, like Josh Connerly. I know you mentioned him from Oregon. I think he's at 31 to Kansas City. Josh Simmons, now a 2nd-round pick, who early on, that was the name that was getting mocked to the Bears, but there's the injury concern, I believe, with him. So it just, because of the gap, like being in the top 10 this year, I think it's kind of difficult because it's going to be really hard for them to trade back because they're one after where like the natural stoppage point for quarterbacks is going to be. If the Saints don't take a quarterback, or if they do, the Bears are like, oh, well, we want to move back a couple spots. Who's moving up with them? Because who are you moving up for? Like, if Jackson Dart, like, I don't know, unless you're Pittsburgh and you're not confident that if the Giants don't take a quarterback, if the second one off the board's at number 9, and you're not confident that Aaron Rodgers is going to sign with you, do you trade up to get Jackson Dart? I don't know. I feel like the Bears are in a precarious spot where moving back is going to be difficult. So when you're at that spot, I can see how they would view it as, we're not overdrafting. We're just taking the best tackle available. Because if we can't move back, it's that player that we want is not going to be available later on. So there's, what about the other Michigan tight end is another question that I get. I think that Tyler Warren is certainly, like, he's a top 10 pick. He's better than the tight end that they have from Michigan, going top 15, top 16 right now. I look at what their actions have told us in the offseason that the most important thing right now is protecting Caleb Williams. And you got to think just about the short term, but also that long-term projection a couple of years out. Braxton Jones is going into a contract year, and he's not healthy right now to do football stuff. So it's not a bad pick. Even if there is somebody who might be a little bit further down on some of these mocks, or maybe on your own personal mock, like you might think, oh, well, that player's not worthy of a top 10 pick. A lot of this is like just where, if they don't feel they can get another bite at the apple until 39, then, I don't think it hurts to draft the player that you want, that you think can fit into a competition right away at a position like left tackle at 10, and not think twice about it.
Yeah. And I think their actions have already shown this offseason how much they are committed right now to making sure that offensive line is fixed. And if they still have a question at left tackle, you'd think that they would address it. I want to end with this. How many times have you flown to New York in the last calendar year?
Last calendar year?
Yeah.
Twice in this year alone was twice, because I went out in March and then I went out last week. Last calendar year is probably, if we're going back to last April, and I'm like eyeballing this in my head right now. Probably like 10 or 11 times, probably. I think it's fair assessment.
It feels like more than that, honestly.
There's stretches where I go and I'll do a couple shows in the week and then fly back. In training camp, it was insane because I was going like every week. I was going twice because there'd be like 3 days on. Bears are off one day, fly to New York that day, come back, come do training camp. The stretch that I had that was like the one that I was like, this is for sure going to kill me, was going from Canton for the Hall of Fame game.
Oh, yeah.
I went to the week before Canton. I was in New York for Around the Horn on a Wednesday, Thursday, came back for training camp. It was at the Back Together Saturday. We're here for the week. go to Canton, fly back on a Saturday night out of that tiny airport in Canton where me and like a few other people on the beat were there for like 4 hours because we were delayed. Went to training camp the next day, the Nate Davis day, last time we ever really saw him. And then flew out. I don't know why I remember that. Flew out that night and then went and did a whole week of First Take, flew back intermittently in between, and then flew back from like there to Buffalo. It's just a lot. There's a lot of travel going on, but it's fun. I love the opportunity when I get to fill in on First Take, Around the Horn, hosting stuff out there. It's been really cool.
Yeah, you got to host Around the Horn. How was that?
It was great. It's such a fun show because it's a fake game show. So it's kind of like there's no rules. Like I can decide how the point scoring system works when Tony's not there. And, it's really, there's a lot of moving parts and it's only 27 and a half minutes by the time it's all done, just with the commercials that you factor in and different blocks. But I love it. I'm sad the show's going away in just over a month. It's been an icon. It's been an institution for 22 and a half years at ESPN. And it is neat that I had my, chance to host multiple times and, get a chance to get that paper toss perfected by the time the show ends.
I saw that. You nailed it.
Yeah, I had a couple days where I was kind of surprised myself on that. And we, opening day of baseball, I got to bring the bat out and do it that way for the paper toss. It was cool.
I am jealous though, of Tony Reality and you having the power of that mute button. I mean,
because a lot of responsibility it comes with the mute button. Being the person
I need that. I really need that at CHGO though. Like if I had the power to at any given moment just mute Braggs or Carm, it would,
You might not have it go. It might just be like dead silence for a stretch of time if you had to do the mute button.
We could use some of that. All right. Well, Courtney, thanks so much for jumping in for Jahns, who's on spring break with his kids. But this was fun. I know our listeners and viewers will love this episode and are loving it right now. So thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we are going to, let's see, we got a weekend coming up. I guess we got, Tuesday, early next week, we're going to hear from Ryan Poles. And we got the Brian Pickle Award and stuff and some sort of mini camp going on. So next week's going to be a busy week at Hallis Hall. We will have it covered, of course, between what happens earlier in the week with mini camp, Ryan Poles doing his pre-draft press conference, and then everything with the weekend as well, the NFL draft. We will have it all covered here on Hoge and Jahns. Make sure you are following us. Go to hoganjahns.com, the Twitter accounts at Hoge and Jahns, Instagram now too. We got some clips going up on there. It's all available for you. And make sure you're checking out everything Courtney does, writes, ESPN.com. You got anything special going on this week? Or is it kind of a calm week for you?
I wrote a piece that was it was fascinating to me just about this defensive tackle class. It went up on Tuesday. Like this is one of the deeper classes that we've seen, but there's a supply and demand issue that in talking to some coaches and GMs over the last couple months that like, these are how teams are built. Like, you remember like Ryan Poles talked about it when the free agency press conference day said, like, we all saw the Super Bowl. You want waves of pass rushers. That's how it was won. And it was won from the Milton Williams on out, in Philadelphia. So it's cool to see how the interior like pass rush has been prioritized, but these guys are just not developed at that level in college. I mean, that's why it's Mason Graham and then a pretty significant gap till you get to Walter Nolan. So I wrote about that up at .com, and it was cool to, see what the numbers were. And like, I think Mel Kiper told me he has 31 with draftable grades, but does that mean all 31 will get drafted? Maybe, maybe not, but you're not going to see like 2019 numbers where you had 6 taken in the first round.
Well, that reminds me, because we had your guy, CJ West from Indiana, on CHGO yesterday, and he was phenomenal. He was an awesome interview. If anybody missed it, go check it out. We had him on right at the start of yesterday's show on CHGO. He's a Chicago guy. He went to Nazareth. College football career was fun to follow. Ends up on your Hoosiers with that awesome season you guys had last year. And he's an interesting guy to maybe keep in mind, like in the middle rounds of the draft. Maybe could even slip into Friday. But that's somebody to keep an eye on. And he was just check out the interview, because it was a great interview.
Awesome. I'm going to do that.
All right. Again, thanks, Courtney. Thanks for everybody watching, listening. Please hit the like button, subscribe. Rate and review the pod. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. We got a lot coming your way next week. Jahns will be back then, and we will talk to you later on. See you next week.